Welcome to Lifecast with Ryan Lee. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a special guest on as we've been talking about self-care. I don't even know how to intro this guest. That's how excited I'm. Like, I'm trying to accurately pontificate what it is that I want to say about one of my best friends in the world. Daniel Young is on the podcast today, ladies and gentlemen. And Daniel Young, I mean, there's so many things that I could attribute to you. He's a pastor. He is a father of 4. He is a husband of 1. Praise God for her. Hello, Ashley, wherever you are. I know you're watching and critiquing this right now, and we welcome that.
Yeah, all feedback. We want it.
Daniel and I played college basketball together. We have so many moments where we have bonded on and off the court. We both have stories as people that are in ministry that should never be shared publicly. And we just, Daniel is someone through, especially the last decade of my life. I've known Daniel for, last 15 years. Mm-hmm. And Daniel has been somebody who has been so consistent in my life. He has always had a voice of wisdom. He is a man of God. He's always someone that you have people in your life that will say, "Hey, I'm praying for you." Daniel's one of those people that doesn't tell you he's praying for you. Daniel's one of those people who on the phone will pray for you. Even the other day he called, was like, "Hey, we need to pray for one of our friends." I said, "Okay, yeah, we need to pray for him." He goes, "No, right now we're going to do this." I'm like, okay. I was making pancakes or something. So anyways, I just appreciate your intentionality. Daniel is also one of my favorite communicators in the world. He has such a profound ability to teach not only the gospel, but really any subject. I just love listening to Daniel talk. He's also an excellent writer, and his latest ebook, I'll let Daniel tell you a little bit about that later, but just completely blew me away. And I just love who you are as a person. I love what you do. And I'm honored that you would spend some time today being on Lifecast as we've been talking about self-care for a little bit. Today, we're talking about mental health. And mental health in America, the statistics are staggering. And Daniel, you know even more than I do on that regard. But I think 2020 is interesting for a couple of reasons. One, COVID-19 and the election, politics and race have dominated most of our dinner table conversations.
Right.
While we've been having those conversations, I think mental health has gotten way worse. What a quarantine, what isolation has done to our society is disturbing. What it's done to marriages, I find myself slipping mentally sometimes where I'm just like, yo, I need to set my equilibrium. Something's off type of deal. And so you and I were having a conversation that I thought, man, we should have this conversation on the podcast about this. And so, man, for you work a lot with students and you work a lot with adults, man. What's been your journey with mental health? What are you seeing from Florida? Did I tell people you're from Florida? You're from Florida. You're not from Florida. You live in Florida. You're from Minnesota. But man, what's your vantage point? What's been your journey with mental health this year in 2020?
Yeah, I would say my vantage point right now, Ryan, is mental health is always something that I think has seemed important to me, but wasn't always personal. As somebody who myself has never struggled with what clinically would be called a mental disorder, because there is a difference between having mental health problems and being diagnosed as someone with a disorder. There's a difference there.
Right.
As someone who's never personally struggled with that, it's always been kind of like 1 or 2 steps removed for me. But just within the past year, you and I were talking about, and I actually remember talking to you right before it happened, it really came home personally, because I had a young adult, somebody, it was actually one of my students who I was the closest with, it was her older brother committed suicide. And this was a kid that, like, as a pastor, as a Christian, from my vantage point, this kid checked all the boxes. I mean, everybody loved him, serving on Sundays. I mean, just seemed to light up the room. And so when I got the news that this was the young man who killed himself, I was just so disoriented by that. And it was actually something that his mom, who herself is a very strong believer, has a very, very strong personal faith. And I just remember, like, she got up and she opened the funeral. She was the first person to speak at her son's funeral after he committed suicide. Wow. And I just remember, like, it was one of those moments where I just was holding my breath, like, what is she going to say? How can she even say anything? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And
she got up there, Ryan, and this is what she said. She said, if you don't treat cancer, you know how it ends up. If you don't treat diabetes, we know how it ends up. And she said, this is what happens when mental illness goes untreated. Wow. And I was like, and then she basically took a handful of minutes and just said, and this is an issue that the church needs to wake up about. Wow. And we need to stop just talking about spiritual matters, and we need to start talking about human beings as holistic creatures. And our mind and our mental health is such a crucial part of who we are. And so I would say for me, that was probably like what turned the key for me. The like, wow, this if I don't know more about this as a pastor, then I can't serve people well. Wow. So that was probably really what made it come home for me.
Wow. So what does a person like you, I mean, what do you do with that? Like what's next steps for you? How do you, for you, I know you recently got certified. What was that journey like? What was it through? What was the process? We know why, but tell me what.
Yeah. So I think it's actually really cool. I mean, the church that I'm a part of here in South Florida, I'm a pastor at Christ Fellowship Church, and it's so beautiful because it actually, like, this whole issue started to become important to the entire leadership of the church. And so they actually took a handful of pastors through a certification program to become what's called a mental health coach. Awesome. So a handful of us on staff here at my church just became certified mental health coaches. And it was a program that's really being piloted by the American Association of Christian Counselors. Okay. And the vision for it is, it's almost like mental health triage, or like first responders for mental health. That's kind of the vision for it. You're like the bridge for people who are experiencing mental health issues, because studies have actually shown the vast majority of people who struggle with mental disorders never seek help for it, ever.
Really?
But the few who do are way more likely to seek out help from clergy than they are from an actual clinician.
Really?
And so
why do you think that is?
Well, I think there's a massive stigma associated with mental health, which is a big part of what I'm praying shifts. And I do think is shifting. I don't know if you've ever seen any of like the memes or the shirts that's like, I need Jesus and a counselor, or whatever. But I'm like, yes, I want to help distribute whoever made that meme or those shirts. But there's a huge stigma, I think, associated with it. I think, if you break your arm, people can see it. People can be like, yo, bro, you need to go get that checked out. But if something's broken in my mind, it's really easy to justify, explain away, and feel shame to admit it. And so most people, they never seek help. But this is the thing that clicked for me as a pastor. is they said people are way more likely to seek help in clergy than they are with an actual clinician or therapist, first of all. And so it was almost like this idea of when trauma happens to someone physically, the ambulance shows up and gets that person to the hospital. So the vision that the American Association of Christian Counselors had was, can we equip a team of first responders across the country in churches? So when someone comes to them in mental health crisis, they can kind of be doing all of the emergency stuff. They can be like mobile emergency rooms and then get them to the people who are more highly trained. So it's kind of like a mid-level service provider, essentially.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So when you went through this training, what surprised you? What did you learn?
The biggest thing that, shocked me was the scope of mental health issues in our country. Because, and I think it goes back to just that, like, it's almost been like the hidden thing in the corner that nobody wants to talk about or address. And just some of the statistics that 1 out of 5 people in America will deal with a mental health issue at some point this year. 1 in 5. That's 45 million people in our country will deal with a significant mental health issue at some point this year. And
how is it classified? When someone says mental health issue, I would say that saying you have a mental health issue is somewhat of a new term over the last decade. Like when I was in high school or middle school, depression was a word that was used. I don't recall someone saying I have anxiety in 8th grade. I don't remember anyone using that vernacular or the idea of mental health awareness. I'm not really sure where that really became a thing. And so when someone says, I'm struggling with depression or I'm struggling with anxiety, is that the 1 in 5? Or are you saying the 1 in 5 is someone that would be clinically diagnosed as someone that says, I have a mental disorder versus I'm having a bad week or a bad year, or I lost my job, or I lost a loved one? How do you, with cancer, there's stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4.
Right.
From what I know, based off of the percentage at which it is taken over in your body, in your bodily organs.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have that, to my knowledge, for the mental health space, for how we talk about these things.
Right.
So when you say 1 in 5, how have they defined that 1 in 5?
Yeah. So what's really interesting is there actually is, there's not like stage 1 through whatever, but there is a distinction in the world of mental health and all that. And it's actually something, what you said, and this continued parallel that keeps coming up between physical health and mental health, that is a paradigm that I want everyone to catch. Okay. I want people to start thinking about mental health the same way they do about physical health, because they are similar, and we take our physical health so seriously. And I want to see people starting to take their mental health just as seriously. But think about it like this, and we use this language all the time. If you're just feeling a little run down, right? Maybe you'll be texting your buddy, hey, how you feeling? Hey, I'm feeling a little under the weather. Or I don't feel so good, right? Think about the language we use physically.
Yeah, for sure.
That would be like analogous to, I'm having some mental health issues right now.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? Like there is such a thing as I'm just not feeling so good mentally.
Yeah.
There is such a thing. But then there is like, I got to go to the ER because something's wrong.
Yes.
And that would be where clinicians would say, that's where that's classified a disorder. So like the clinical definition of mental disorder is, it's a clinically significant disruption of a person's thoughts, moods, behaviors, or ability to relate to others that's severe enough for them to require treatment because it's affecting their life. So that's kind of like a clinical definition of a disorder. Like a disorder is like something is so wrong, so disrupted that I recognize I need treatment. And think about that. Once again, I want this paradigm to happen for everyone. Think about mental health like you think about physical health. When do you know to go to the ER? When there's a significant enough physical disruption that like, if you have significant abdominal pain, that's going to affect you everywhere. That's going to affect you at home. It's going to affect you at work. That's going to affect you everywhere across the board. And I would say that's really probably the delineating line is if you're struggling at work, but you're pretty much okay at home, you may be struggling with a situational mental health issue, but it's probably not a clinical disorder. Does that make sense?
That's good. That's a great way to provide clarity on that, because, you know, when someone comes to me and says they're struggling with something, I'm always trying to, not like a counselor per se, but I'm almost trying to diagnose.
Right.
Did they just break up with you? Or is this like holistically? So I guess my question is, you know, I know how to take care of myself physically. I think most people universally know I should eat well and exercise. What is the equivalent to taking care of ourselves mentally?
So here's where I want to start on that. And it's going to be probably what most people won't expect me to start here, but it's just what I've learned. And it's so important. And as a parent, it really jumps out at me because think about where do you start with your kids? Where do you start with Jackson? You want him to be healthy. Where do you start? You start when he's young. As a kid, you want to create healthy eating habits in Jackson. And I even think like as a dad, so many times it's been like, I'll be drinking a Diet Coke or something. My kids will be like, yo, Daddy, can I drink that Coke? And I'll be like, no, drink some water. Right? Sure. So I almost take, I take their physical health even more serious than I take my own at times. Yeah. And one of the things I think that has happened is most of our society thinks of mental health as an adult issue. But the studies have shown there's actually some significant stats that have shown that most mental health disorders are in place before the age of 24. 75%. 75% of mental health disorders are already in place by 24. But get this, 50% are in place by the age of 14. Wow. And so I think we have a tendency as adults to dismiss children's mental health, children's mind states. Oh, just get over it. Oh, just move on. Oh, just quit being dramatic. Right? Wow. But what if we took the same attitude with mental health that we took with our kids' physical health? That we paid. I mean, so I know people who are hyper focused on what their kids eat. What if you were just that focused on their mental health? So I think that's where I would say to start. If you want to talk about like meta kind of grand scheme, zoom out, wide, what do we need to do to be mentally healthy? We need to start early. Wow. That's what I would say.
And how do we, is that what our kids are watching? How is that developed before the age 14? Is that, you know, I can tell Jackson, my son, hey, we need to go exercise. He doesn't need to be told that because he has an infinite amount of energy. We're always trying to get him to sit down. Okay. But so he gets in his steps, no question about it. But let's say he wasn't that way. It would be, hey, let's get outside. Let's go to the park. Let's go do these things. What's the equivalent of that for even a parent to say, hey, are there exercises that can stimulate a healthy mindset? Is it reading? What is it?
Yeah. I mean, there's always the basics, right? That everybody talks about. It's reading at an early age. It's being careful about screen time, because the more studies that come out, the more we realize just how important it is to monitor the amount of time that we and our children are spending in front of a screen. But here's once again where I want to go back to the analogy of physical health.
Yeah.
How do you know that you need to really pay attention to your child because they're hurting? When Jax runs in and he's like, Daddy, my arm. Then you're like, what are you like? Just suck it up. Well, maybe sometimes, but most of the time, if your child is manifesting pain physically, your reaction is to engage, is to slow down, it's to be patient, is to be a non-anxious presence for them, right? Like, it's okay, Daddy's here. It's to bring comfort. And I want to see myself, and I want to see more parents start to do that for their child's mental health. And here's what I mean. Like, I've even in my own kids started to notice certain behaviors. Like when your kid responds to something in a way that seems completely overblown. Maybe that happens once, that's a temper tantrum. But if that's a pattern, that's a sign to pay attention to. I need to find out what's going on. What is it that's making my child, understanding that children can have anxiety? And here's one thing, just real quick, that I just want to mention for parents, anybody around young kids that I've learned. Kids don't know how to say, I feel anxious. But so often what they'll say is, my stomach hurts. Because think about with you as an adult, when you feel anxious, where do you feel that?
Wow.
Where do you physically manifest your anxiety? It's like we say, I got a pit in my stomach.
Yep.
And kids don't know how to say that. So they just say, Mommy, Daddy, my tummy hurts. So it's just kind of learning to pay attention to mental signs like you would to physical signs. If that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. And I'm recollecting moments I've had with Jackson where I'm like, man, was I paying attention to the sign, and obviously he's 6. But yeah, no, that's even convicting to me for sure. And I'm thinking about our viewers. I'm thinking about some of our listeners today who, man, maybe they're a mom and they're just in the thick of it right now. They've taken a mental beating this year, homeschooling, COVID. I've found that in a lot of homes, Mama Bear is the CDC in the house. That she's the one making sure that people are washing their hands. Dads atypically are kind of like, you're gonna be all right. Well, we're gonna wash our hands. There's some, but usually the regulator is So there's this. I'm just thinking about, man, people that this year, even single friends that are just like, man, dude, like you've got your family to be around all the time. It's a, that what isolation has done to so many people. I mean, what would you tell them that they can be doing, even heading into, man, if they're writing down 2021 goals? Hey, this is a way that you can take care of yourself mentally. Because I think most people put down physical goals. Yeah. If my takeaway from this conversation is, man, I need to be thinking about what are my mental 2021 goals. What would you say to that?
Right. I think what I would actually want to do is almost back that up a little bit, because just like with physical medicine, there's a difference between preventative care, and treatment. Right. And I would almost rather focus on somebody who's in a place where they feel like I need treatment. Okay. Because I really feel like, the people watching your podcast, they're watching because they're people who are interested in bettering themselves. They're interested in self-growth. And I feel like you can go Google, some mental health exercises. You don't need me for that. You jump on the Google machine and you can find some good stuff quick. Yeah. But what I want to do is I want to speak to what I think is the more pressing issue, which is there's all kinds of things we can do for preventative care for our minds. Right. You guys can figure that out. I want to speak to the person who just now is realizing I think I have a mental health issue.
Mm-hmm.
What should I do?
Yes.
That's who I want to speak to.
Yeah.
So what I would say to you first and foremost is don't be dismissive. Don't be dismissive. Just the same way that we all probably have those friends or those people in our lives who know, it's like no matter how sick they are, they just live in denial.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they just keep trying to power through.
Yeah.
And there's been a saying that's gotten popular lately, and it's listen to your body. When your body's telling you you're tired, listen to it. When your body's telling you you're worn out, listen to it. And what I would want to say is mind your mind. Mind your mind. Like, when you wake up in the morning, Ryan Leak, I just don't feel right physically.
Yeah.
But you also know, man, I just don't feel right mentally. I feel like I'm living in a fog, or I feel like I'm lost, or like those are all kind of words that are keys to know I might be having a mental health issue right now. The first thing I would say is if you feel like you are, don't be dismissive. Mind your mind because it matters. And then the second thing I would say is get help. Get help. Don't try to work through your mind issues on your own. The same way that you would go to the Minute Clinic or you would go to the ER if you knew you were having a physical problem. Get help. Talk to somebody, even if that somebody is just a friend at first. Yeah. Because of the nature of our mind and the way that it works, simply communicating about it is the first step toward healing. So I would say, don't be dismissive and get help. Talk to somebody about it.
Well, I appreciate that, man. Dude, your wisdom is so profound, and I love you like a brother, my friend. And for everybody that's watching today, everybody that's listening today, and that's truly my prayer for people is, man, I see it all the time. People that have issues that just aren't willing to get help. Sometimes the issue is admitting that they have a problem. I think that there's some pride within our culture that doesn't want to raise our hands and say, hey, I'm the one that needs this. I think where it's hit home with me this year is seeing the amount of megachurch pastors that have also committed suicide. Yep. And you just think, who's helping them and who's helping, and what was it? Did they not raise their hand? Did they not, was the help not good? Like, was it, but man, that's my hope and prayer for everybody, man, is that they would truly reach out and when they need it. And sometimes you mentioned the word preventative, man, maybe even before they need it to say, hey, man, I feel myself slipping a little bit. And I know some people are kind of taboo about counseling. I'm so pro counseling. It's not even funny. I mean,
so pro.
Like, I'm in counseling. Me and Amanda stay in counseling. Like, and for us, it's not we're always trying to work through problems. For us, it's a barrier of saying, hey, it's a guardrail. We don't want to have more problems. And so it's a healthy thing for us. It's a checks and balances for us. Yep. And so, some people are like, man, counseling is for people that have problems. I'm like, well, I guess I'm one of those people.
And who doesn't have problems? Like,
who doesn't have problems?
An arrogant posture. Counseling is only for imperfect people.
No, it is. That's how people see it. And it's just like, man, I absolutely love it, man. And so I encourage everybody, man, if you're struggling, Phil, you got to reach out. It's the only way. It's the only way sometimes you can get the help. And that's my prayer for everybody today. Daniel, thank you so much for being on Lifecast with Ryan. Lifecast with Ryan Leak. And Hey,
and I love you too, bro. I just want you to know that.
Oh, I appreciate that. Before we let you go, how can our listeners, how can our viewers connect with you?
Yeah, you can hit me up on Instagram if you want. My handle is @dyoung10 on Instagram.
Yep.
I have a website, danielyoung.cc. You can hit me up on my website. Really, that's all I use as far as socials. You can try to find me on Facebook, but I'm never on that bad boy.
Yeah. You can
hit me on Instagram or my website.
So hit up my boy Daniel. We probably just put up your Instagram account and your website so people can see that and see your beautiful family and all of that. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Lifecast with Ryan Lee and my very special guest, Daniel Young. If today's episode added value to your life, do me a favor and share it with a friend, rate it, review it, and don't forget to subscribe.